Yield to maturities are part of the structure of interest rate, and from these we often infer the spot rates and the forward rates. Again, we've seen the definition of the yield to maturity before. Here it is. You can find the yield to maturity given a bond price, given its coupon payments, and given its final par at maturity. We can find the yield to maturity. The yield to maturity is the rate that causes the discounted cash flows to equal the bond price. That is how a yield to maturity curve is found in all cases, and in particular when we're looking at these bills and bonds, notes that have more than one or have coupon payments. This is the formula that's used to come up with those payments. All right, we have talked about the yield to maturity, spot rates, and forward rates. I have put a formula up here that determines the bond price using the yield to maturity. That's what we do. Given a bond price, we can find the yield to maturity, or vice versa. We're given the bond price, second equation there, given spots. And again, if the spot rates and the yield to maturity will yield the same bond price. And then finally, the forward rates will also yield the same price of the bond. And we've shown the relationship between forward rates and spot rates before. There obviously is a relationship between the yields and the spot rates, and then that will lead to the forward rates as well. We can find the spot and the forwards from the yield to maturity curve on non-zero coupon bonds. What we have to do is do a process called backwardization. If you want to know how to do it, you can look it up on Google, and you'll find just do yield backwardization. It is a pretty straightforward procedure, but it does take some time to do. I am going to illustrate, though, the process of finding a bond price and then its yield to maturity. And remember, in equilibrium, all of these equations must hold. All right? If they don't, there is arbitrage conditions available. I'm going to illustrate the relationship between spot rates and yield to maturity with this following question. What is a yield to maturity on a bond that is 2 years in length, has a 2% coupon, and we're going to assume that it has a $1,000 par? We're going to use these spot rates right here. We've used these in previous modules, and I am going to calculate the yield to maturity on this bond. To do that, I'm going to start here and look at the payments from this bond, and they are 10%, $10, and let me just do the detail of that. We have a 2-year bond. First year payment is 2%. Divided by 2, $10. At the end, we get 1,010, which is 4 periods in the future, 2 years in the future. All right, we're going to answer this question, we're going to find the bond price. Then we're going to use the internal rate of return to find the internal rate of return of that series. To find the bond price, remember, we're going to use discounting by the spot rates get us the bond price. So there we have the spot rates. Let's calculate the discount factor. There's the discount factor. And then we're going to find the discounted cash flow for each one of those periods. Sum them, and there's our bond price. $891.55. All right, to find the yield to maturity, we're just going to put in here our cash flows. We're going to pay minus $891 for it. we have these cash flows in the future. The internal rate of return is going to find our yield to maturity. There's our cash flow. Times 2. So, given these spot rates, this cash flow, our yield to maturity on this bond will be 7.97%. Now, note, if I change anything about this bond, in particular the coupon rate, I'm going to change, obviously, the bond price and also the yield to maturity. Again, if you look at this yield to maturity, it's sort of weighting these spot rates. But just let me give you an example. Let's say that this, rather than a 2%, it's 4%. So I'm just going to say it's 4%, and you're going to see that that 7.97 changes a little bit, not a lot. And then we get $1,000 at the end. 7.95. All right, what that does illustrate, though, is that if I have two bonds, they're both 6 years in length, they will have different yield to maturities depending on what their coupon rates are. And again, think about the yield to maturity as a weighting of the spot rates, and it's weighted by the cash flows during the period. That is the relationship between the yield to maturity and the spot rates. And again, we could start with yield to maturities on different bonds and then find the spot rates. You give us any one of these series, spot rates, I can find anything, yield to maturities. If you give me forward rates, I can find the spot rates and the yield to maturities. You give me yield to maturities, I can find the spot rates and the forward rates.